Number one, Mr Speaker.
Oh, President.
Mr Speaker, I've established a Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council, the first of its kind at any COP, and it's working with the UK Presidency to deliver a successful summit. The co-chairs are youth climate activists, one from the Global North and one from the Global South. And of course, I'm also meeting civil society and youth groups on my international visits to ensure that their voices are heard.
Andy Carter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend for his answer. Does he agree with me that children in our schools can play a crucial part in helping us to get to net zero by becoming young climate leaders? And let me give him some examples from my constituency. Groups such as Warrington Youth Voice, who've organised their first Green Schools conference last month, or pupils at Penketh Primary School who've come together to take steps to reduce energy in their homes. And would he encourage members from this House to reach out to their schools in their constituencies to build greater understandings of the work of COP26?
Sharma.
Well, what an excellent question, Mr Speaker. And can I commend my honourable friend for the work that he is doing to encourage youth climate activists in his constituency, in the Warrington Youth Voice, the Penketh South Primary School. Of course, as he will know, that in May we sent a COP26, or in fact last month we sent a COP26 schools pack designed to engage students on climate action. It's been sent to primary schools across the UK. And of course, MPs in May also received a UK engagement pack.
Question number 2, please, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, we are pressing all countries to come forward with mid-century net zero commitments and aligned, ambitious 2030 emissions reduction targets. We have seen some progress. When the UK took on the COP26 presidency, less than 30% of the global economy was covered by a net zero emissions target. That figure is now 70%.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Some of government claims that the UK has reduced its emissions footprint by 42% since 1990, which is a commendable feat. But this has been achieved in part by offshoring manufacturing and outsourcing many emissions to countries that produce the goods we consume, such as China. If we factor in those emissions, the UK emissions reduction is possibly as little as 10 to 15%. So ahead of COP26, what steps will the Minister take to include the full scope of our emissions in its accounting, including those arising from UK consumption, supply chains and international aviation and shipping?
Well, Mr Speaker, as the Honourable Lady knows, when she talks about aviation shipping, we have included that in Carbon Budget 6. What I would say to her is the role of the UK COP presidency, of course, is to ensure climate action and ambition across the whole of the UK, and that is what we're working to deliver.
Shadow Minister Matthew Pennycook.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Keeping 1.5 alive is quite rightly now one of the government's stated aims for COP26. But while we don't doubt the COP President's personal commitment to delivering on that objective, the government as a whole is patently still not doing enough. If we're to markedly increase the global ambition when it comes to 2030 targets, forge a coalition with vulnerable nations to hold the major emitters to account, and mobilise the climate finance essential to unlocking any agreement, we need sustained engagement and focus from the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor, and we need it now. With just over 100 days left to this critical summit, does the President recognise that if senior members of the government don't raise their game quickly, there is a very real risk of failure in Glasgow in November?
President Sharma.
Well, Mr Speaker, I can tell the honourable gentleman that, of course, there is a concerted effort across the whole of government to ensure that we are pressing other countries to come forward with ambition. We, of course, are seen around the world as a leader on climate action, both in terms of the actions we've taken, but also the commitments we've made. And I can tell him that Prime Minister has regular dialogues with world leaders, as does the Chancellor and the Foreign Secretary with their counterparts.
Let's go to SNP spokesperson Deirdre Brooke. Deirdre.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Current carbon budgets will see the world miss the 1.5 degrees target, with all the disastrous consequences that will have. And the UK's portion of that carbon budget is up to 3 billion tonnes of CO2 higher than is proportional for its population. And we saw France put in the effort for a global improvement in the Paris Agreement, but we've seen nothing comparable from the UK government. When will we see that change? And what conversations is he actually having with his colleagues in the Cabinet about the immediate actions their departments should be taking to reduce the UK's carbon contribution?
Mr Speaker, respectfully, I disagree with the Honourable Lady. Firstly, since the year 2000, the UK has decarbonised faster than any other G20 nation. And of course, our NDC of at least 68% reduction on emissions on a 1990 base year by 2030 is world-leading, as indeed is the commitment in terms of our carbon budgets. So we are doing our bit. Of course, there is always room for all of us to do more.
Let's go to the Chair Select Committee, Durham Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has Britain lost her credibility when asking developing nations to pay to decarbonise, following the government's affirmation yesterday to cut UK international aid spending?
Absolutely.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell him that I have seen firsthand when I was Deputy Secretary of State, and indeed in other roles, that the UK support continues to transform millions of lives for the better across the world. He will know that we will continue to spend over £10 billion this year in aid, and of course, we now have certainty that we will be returning to the 0.7% target.